The blizzard erased everything, footprints, trails, even the sound of her cry. Searchers shook their heads, saying no one could survive out there. But Daniel's canine, Shadow, froze mid-step. His nose buried in the snow, his paws clawing like a machine, he refused to stop digging. And then, beneath the frozen silence, Daniel heard it too, the muffled whimper of someone still alive. The storm had swallowed the world. Snow hurled sideways across Miller's Creek, erasing fences, barns, even the road itself. The search party struggled forward in a broken line, their lanterns glowing faintly against the endless white. Every gust clawed at their faces, stealing breath and freezing skin. Daniel moved at the front, his shoulders hunched against the wind, his hand gripping Shadow's harness. The shepherd's fur bristled with frost, his body tense, nose low to the ground. They had been tracking for over an hour, but now, the tracks were gone. Boot prints that had been faint but steady were swallowed in an instant. The blizzard swept across the trail like a merciless hand, smoothing the snow into a flat, endless sheet. One of the men cursed behind them. "That's it. No more trail. She's gone." Another shook his head grimly. "No one lasts out here. Not in this cold." Daniel clenched his jaw, scanning the blank horizon. His chest burned with cold, his lungs raw, but he refused to accept the words. "She's not gone. Not until we know." Shadow stopped suddenly. His ears pricked, his body stiff. Then, without warning, he began to dig. His claws slashed into the snow, spraying it in frantic bursts. His nose buried deep, he growled low in his throat, paws working like a machine. "What's he doing?" one of the men shouted over the wind. Daniel's eyes widened. "He's got something." He dropped to his knees beside the shepherd, pushing snow aside with his bare hands. The icy crust cut his skin, but he didn't care. Every claw stroke, every shove of his hand carved deeper into the drift. "Come on, boy. Show me." Shadow snarled through the snow, his body vibrating with urgency. He dug faster, harder, his barks muffled but furious. Then, he froze, ears pinned. Daniel pressed his ear close. At first, only the howl of the wind. Then, faint. Fragile. A sound the storm tried to bury. A whimper. Daniel's heart slammed. "She's here." The men stumbled closer, their faces pale with shock. Impossible. But Daniel didn't waste another second. He tore into the snow with his hands, ignoring the sting in his fingers. Shadow dug beside him, claws blurring, snow flying in every direction. A scrap of fabric appeared. Blue. Torn. Daniel's throat caught. "We've got her." The shepherd lunged forward, teeth clamping gently onto the fabric, tugging it free of the ice. Daniel shoved deeper, his fingers striking against something small and cold, an arm. The storm raged above, furious, but beneath the snow, life stirred. And it was Shadow who had heard it first. The scrap of blue cloth trembled in the wind, half buried, half free. Daniel's numb fingers clawed deeper, scraping against ice that refused to break. His knuckles split, blood mixing with snow, but he didn't stop. Not when he'd heard that faint, muffled whimper. Shadow snarled low, his teeth locked on the fabric, pulling and tugging while his paws dug furiously. Snow flew in every direction, spraying across Daniel's chest, but the shepherd was relentless. "Easy, boy." Daniel gasped, his breath white in the freezing dark. "We'll get her, just hold on." The men behind hesitated, their lanterns shaking in their hands. One called out, "She's buried too deep, it's no use." Daniel's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "You hear that sound? That's her fighting. If she's fighting, then so are we." Shadow barked, sharp and savage, as if to echo his master's words. Then he plunged his nose into the snow again, paws slashing faster, harder, each stroke tearing into the drift like a soldier storming a barricade. Daniel's fingers broke through a crust of ice, and then he felt it. Skin. Cold, fragile skin. Got her, he roared. He shoved deeper, both arms plunging into the snow, his hands circling around the small, limp arm. He pulled, but the drift held on like a coffin refusing to open. Shadow clamped onto the sleeve again, growling through clenched teeth, straining with all his strength. Pull, boy! Daniel shouted, his muscles screaming as he yanked. The snow cracked, collapsed inward, and the child's face broke free. Emily's pale skin glistened with frost, her lashes crusted with ice, her lips blue. Her chest barely moved, but then, through the storm, came the faintest gasp. She's breathing! Daniel cried, his throat tight with relief. Shadow whined, licking the ice from her cheeks, pawing at her gently as if urging her awake. His amber eyes burned with fierce determination, he hadn't dug through death to stop now. Daniel tore off his outer coat, wrapping her small body in it. He pressed her against his chest, his own warmth flowing into her frozen form. Stay with me, Em. Stay. Emily's lips parted, a whisper almost lost to the wind. Cold. Daniel closed his eyes, his voice breaking. I know. But you're not alone anymore. The men around them stood frozen, all written across their faces. One whispered hoarsely, that dog, he heard her under all that. Another shook his head. No man could have. Not in this storm. But Shadow didn't care for their disbelief. He pressed his muzzle to Emily's cheek, whining softly, his breath hot against her frozen skin. He had found her. He would keep her. Daniel tightened his hold, turning to the men. We're not done. She's alive, but the storm's still trying to take her. Move! With Shadow leading, they staggered back toward the treeline, the shepherd's barks echoing through the blizzard like war drums. The river had failed once. The storm had buried her. But Shadow had heard through the silence, and tonight, he had pulled life back from the snow. Daniel's arms locked tighter around Emily's frail body as he stumbled forward through the blizzard. The child weighed almost nothing, but the cold made every step feel like dragging stone. Her head lolled against his chest, her lips trembling, her voice faint as a breath. So cold. Shadow barked sharply, circling them in the snow before darting ahead again, breaking a path with his powerful body. His tail was stiff, his ears pinned forward. He moved not as if leading, but as if dragging them with sheer will. Keep moving! Daniel barked over his shoulder at the other men. If we stop, she dies. The storm clawed at their faces, filling every gap in their coats, trying to smother heat and hope. The lanterns flickered, almost useless in the whiteout. One man shouted, "We won't last another mile." Daniel's voice cut through the howl of wind, raw with fire. Then you let me last. You let him last. He nodded at Shadow, whose paws slammed relentlessly into the snow, his bark slicing the dark like a blade. Emily stirred weakly, her small hand twitching against Daniel's chest. Dog? Daniel bent his head low, whispering fiercely against her frozen hair. He's here. He's fighting for you. So am I, don't you dare stop now. Shadow whined at her name, pressing his body against her legs whenever Daniel slowed, lending his warmth even as he forged forward. At last, they reached a thicket of bent pines, their branches heavy with snow but enough to block some of the wind. Daniel dropped to his knees, lowering Emily gently onto the packed earth beneath the trees. He stripped the blanket from his pack, wrapping her tight, then pulled her back against his chest. Her skin burned with cold, too cold. Shadow pressed against her other side, his fur wet but radiating what heat he could. He licked her face urgently, whining low and steady, as if speaking to her in the only language he knew, stay. Stay with us. Daniel fumbled with frozen fingers, striking his matches again and again until one caught. He fed the flame desperately, blowing until a small fire sputtered to life, its glow a fragile island against the storm. The men crowded close, shielding the flames, their eyes wide as they watched Daniel's frantic hands rubbing warmth into the girl's arms. "She won't make it," one muttered. Daniel's head snapped up, fury burning in his eyes. "She will. Because giving up isn't an option." Shadow barked once, sharp and savage, his breath steaming in the air. He curled tighter against Emily, his body shaking but his spirit unbroken. Minutes dragged like hours. Emily's breathing slowed, shallow, slipping like a tide going out. Daniel pressed his forehead against hers, whispering, begging. "Breathe with me, Em. In, out. I've got you. Shadow's got you. Don't let the cold win." Then, at last, a cough. Harsh, ragged, but alive. She gasped suddenly, sucking in air like she was clawing it back from the dark. Daniel choked out a laugh that was half a sob. "That's it. That's my girl." Shadow yelped in triumph, licking her face furiously, tail thumping for the first time since the storm began. Emily whispered, her voice a faint thread. "He dug me out." Daniel kissed her damp hair, his eyes burning. "Yes, Em. He dug until he found you. And he'll never stop." The fire glowed stronger, smoke curling upward into the storm. Around it, men who had almost given up now sat in silence, their faces softened with awe. The child lived. The cold had tried to claim her. But a soldier's arms, and a dog's endless fight, had pulled her back. The fire hissed and crackled under the pines, a fragile island of warmth in the raging storm. Daniel cradled Emily close, her breath shallow but steadier now. Shadow lay pressed against her side, his fur steaming as the fire dried it, his amber eyes glowing as they scanned the darkness beyond the trees. The other men huddled close, whispering in low voices. The storm muffled sound, but fear carried easily. They weren't afraid of the wind anymore, they were afraid of what it had left in its wake. Shadow's ears twitched. His head snapped toward the treeline. A growl rolled deep from his chest. Daniel stiffened. His hand slid to the knife at his belt. "What is it, boy?" The shepherd rose slowly, hackles bristling, his body rigid. His gaze burned into the white veil of snow. Then, there. A figure staggered from the blizzard. He was tall, shoulders hunched beneath a torn coat, beard rimed with frost. His hands shook as he stumbled into the glow of the fire. His eyes darted from the flames to the men to the child in Daniel's arms. Shadow exploded in barks, lunging forward, teeth flashing. His rope snapped taut, his body straining to put himself between the stranger and Emily. The men scrambled to their feet, startled. One raised his lantern higher. "Who goes there?" The man lifted his hands slowly, his voice hoarse. Don't shoot. I need warmth. Please." Daniel's eyes narrowed. His soldier's instincts flared, the tremor in the man's voice, the hunger in his eyes, the way they lingered too long on Emily in Shadow. His jaw tightened. "Stay where you are." The stranger took another shaky step closer. Shadow's growl rose to a savage snarl, his body vibrating with fury. "Call him off," the man snapped suddenly, fear twisting into irritation. "I'm not a threat." Daniel didn't blink. "That's not what he thinks." The man faltered, his eyes flicking to the shepherd, then back to Daniel. He forced a cracked laugh. "He's just a dog." Daniel's grip tightened on his knife. His voice dropped to a growl. "He's the reason she's alive. If he says you're trouble, I'll believe him over any words from your mouth." Emily stirred faintly, whispering in her half-sleep. "Dog, safe." The stranger's eyes sharpened at that, his lips pressing into a thin line. "You'll freeze out here if you don't share your fire." Daniel didn't move, his body a wall between Emily and the man. You want warmth? Sit there. Not one step closer. He pointed to the far side of the flames. The stranger hesitated, then sank to his knees, stretching his hands toward the fire. His eyes flicked sideways again, to Emily, to Shadow, to the pack lying by Daniel's side. Calculating. Shadow never sat. His growl didn't ease. His body stayed rigid, his amber eyes locked on the man's every twitch. The storm raged outside, but Daniel knew the truth in his gut: the blizzard wasn't the only enemy tonight. And Shadow had already chosen which danger to watch. The fire spat and hissed as snow dripped from the branches above, its glow trembling weakly in the storm's breath. Daniel sat with Emily wrapped tight against his chest, her faint breaths warming the fabric of his coat. Shadow remained pressed against her side, ears pricked, amber eyes locked like a weapon on the man across the flames. The stranger hunched low, his frostbitten hands stretched too close to the fire. The skin on his knuckles was cracked, blackened in places. Steam rose from his coat as the heat thawed the crust of ice clinging to him. He sighed loudly, but there was no relief in his voice, only a hollow edge, as though the sound was meant for the others to hear. Daniel's soldier's eyes missed nothing. The way the man's gaze flicked, again and again, toward Emily. The way his jaw clenched each time Shadow growled. The way his fingers lingered too long near the kindling pile, as if calculating what could be taken. One of the men whispered uneasily, "Maybe we should share food with him." Daniel shook his head once, sharp. "Not yet." The stranger caught the words, his cracked lips twisting into a crooked smile. "I told you, I'm just a farmer. Storm caught me out on the road. Lost everything." Shadow's snarl deepened. His body lowered, ready to spring, teeth gleaming in the firelight. Daniel's voice was ice. "You lost everything, yet you carry no pack? No lantern? Not even a rope?" The man's smile faltered. His eyes darted, then hardened. I dropped them in the river." Shadow barked once, explosive, like a gunshot. His growl turned savage, vibrating through the earth beneath them. He lunged so hard the rope snapped taut, his teeth stopping inches from the man's leg. The men flinched back, one muttering, "Easy, dog, easy." But Daniel didn't calm him. His voice was steady, dangerous. "He doesn't lie. If he warns me, I believe him." The stranger's smile returned, thin and bitter. "It's just a dog. Animals growl at shadows." Daniel's eyes burned across the fire. "No. He sees what men try to hide." Emily stirred faintly in her sleep, her lips moving against Daniel's chest. "Safe, dog." The stranger's eyes narrowed at the sound. His voice dropped, bitter. "One girl. One dog. You'd risk all our lives for them?" Daniel leaned forward, his knife glinting in the firelight. "I'd risk the world for them. And if you think otherwise, you won't make it past this fire." For a moment, silence pressed in. The only sounds were the pop of the flames, the howl of the wind, and the steady rumble of Shadow's growl. The stranger looked away at last, muttering under his breath, his face twisting in the shadows. But Shadow didn't ease. His ears stayed locked, his body trembling with warning. Daniel didn't relax either. The storm outside could bury them, but he knew the real danger now sat just across the fire. And Shadow, as always, was the first to see it. The fire had burned low, its edges pulsing faintly like a dying heartbeat. Above, the heavy pine boughs groaned under the growing weight of snow. The wind had slowed, but Daniel knew better than to trust it. Storms like this often paused just before they struck harder. Shadow stood now, not pacing, not barking, just watching. Still. Tense. Every breath out of him was fog, but every breath was silent. His ears were pinned forward, eyes fixed not on the stranger, not even on the fire, but upward, toward the thick branches sagging with the burden of the blizzard. Daniel followed his line of sight, then heard it. A soft crack. Then another. Faster. Closer. He barely had time to shout. Move! The crack turned to a splintering roar. With a monstrous snap, the pine above them gave way. A wall of snow and ice crashed downward like a collapsing roof. Limbs broke, branches fell, and the entire shelter of boughs thundered to the earth. Daniel rolled, curling Emily into his arms, shielding her as the snow slammed into his back. Cold drove into him like fists. One of the men screamed as he stumbled backward, the fire snuffed in an instant beneath a blanket of white. Shadow didn't flinch. He darted first, lunging, teeth bared, not at the falling snow, but at the stranger. Daniel caught it through the chaos. The man had leapt forward, not away from danger, but toward the spot where Daniel's pack and rifle had been lying near the fire. His hand reached through the snow, fingers closing around something, metal glinting. Shadow, now! The shepherd collided with him mid-lunge, knocking the man flat onto his back. A knife skidded from his grasp, disappearing into the drifts. Shadow's teeth sank into the man's arm, not deep enough to tear, just enough to freeze him in place. The man howled. Call him off. Call him off. I didn't. But Shadow didn't need words. He needed the truth, and he'd already heard the lie. Daniel emerged from the snow with Emily in his arms, coughing hard, his breath ragged. One of the men behind him had a lantern still flickering. Another clutched his bleeding shoulder. But all eyes were on the man pinned under the shepherd's fury. You came for the girl, Daniel said flatly. Not for warmth. Not for shelter. The man's eyes darted, wild and hunted. She's not yours to keep. People are offering money for kids like her. Families up north. They pay double if the child's been rescued, makes them feel like heroes. One of the other men cursed aloud. You were going to sell her, another whispered, his voice breaking. Daniel's jaw clenched, hard. You picked the wrong fire to crawl toward. The man screamed again as Shadow's jaws tightened just slightly, enough to make the point. Enough to end the struggle. Daniel pulled Emily tighter, shielding her face as the man writhed beneath the dog. She whimpered, half asleep, unaware of how close she'd come to vanishing again, this time not under snow, but into hands far worse. Shadow, Daniel said low, his voice like a blade, release. The shepherd obeyed with military precision, stepping back, but not far. His body stayed tense, ready, watching. The man rolled onto his side, clutching his bleeding arm, spitting curses into the snow. You don't know who you're dealing with. Daniel stood above him, cold fury carved into his features. Neither did you. One of the men brought rope. They tied the stranger's hands and feet, ignoring his threats, his pleads, his claims of knowing people who'd come looking. Daniel turned to the others. We can't stay here anymore. The trees won't hold, and we've lost the fire. Shadow barked once, sharp, urgent. He was already pawing at the edge of the trees, ears locked on the north ridge. Daniel nodded. He knows where to go. Even without a compass, even without a trail, the dog still led. And everyone followed. They moved like ghosts through the storm, their figures hunched, steps uncertain, Emily wrapped tight in Daniel's arms. The snow seemed endless now, ankle-deep, then shin-deep, then up to the knees in places. The wind had returned, this time colder, quieter, as if watching. Shadow led them with unwavering instinct. His black antan coat was crusted with frost, but he showed no sign of slowing. Every few yards he would pause, turn his head, and wait for Daniel to catch up. The prisoner stumbled behind, tired and bitter, mumbling curses between coughs. Two men kept hold of him, one dragging, one watching. They no longer debated mercy. Shadow had shown them what mercy nearly cost. Atop the north ridge, the land dropped away sharply. Trees thinned. Snow drifts deepened. And then, suddenly, Shadow stopped. His ears lifted. His head tilted. Then he barked once, short and focused, his eyes scanning the swirling dark beyond the ridge. Daniel climbed beside him, breathing hard. Emily nestled beneath his coat like a bundled whisper. He followed the dog's line of sight. And there it was. A flicker. Then another. Not firelight. Not a flare. But electric light. Faint. Flickering. Orange, then yellow, then out again. Do you see it? Daniel asked the man behind him. I saw it, the man nodded. Could be a ranger cabin. Daniel turned to Shadow. You sure, boy? The shepherd gave a low, purposeful whine. Then he moved forward again, nose to the wind, paws deliberate. He didn't question. He knew. The slope downward was treacherous. The snow gave way underfoot. One man nearly slid into a tree. The wind clawed at them harder now, desperate to push them back. It didn't want to let them go. Emily stirred. Daniel leaned down. Almost there, Em. Hold on. Her lips barely moved. The lights. You saw them? She nodded weakly. He found them. Daniel looked at Shadow, pride swelling in his chest. Yes, he did. Minutes passed like hours. But the light grew closer. Clearer. It was a cabin, small, tilted slightly from age, but standing strong against the elements. A generator buzzed weakly near the back. One of the bulbs hanging outside flickered again. Smoke curled faintly from a chimney pipe. Shadow reached the door first. He didn't bark, just sat, wagging his tail slowly, waiting. Daniel knocked once, hard. No answer. Again, louder. Still silence. He nodded to the others. Cover me. He drew his knife, then opened the door slow and steady. Inside was dark but warm, wooden walls, a stove burning low, and blankets stacked in a crate. No one inside. Abandoned, but intact. Safe. Daniel turned. Bring her in. The men poured in after him, laying Emily near the fire. One man went to stoke the flames. Another checked the generator outside, coaxing it to a louder hum. A bulb inside sparked to life, casting soft light over the wooden floor. Shadow curled beside Emily instantly, his head on her chest. She reached a weak hand to his fur. I knew you'd find it, she whispered. Daniel knelt beside them, brushing snow from her forehead. You're safe now. I promise. The prisoner, still tied, was forced to sit near the far wall. One of the men stood guard, rifle resting on his knees. I never would have believed it, one whispered, staring at the shepherd. No compass. No trail. Just a dog. Daniel looked at his partner, his brother in the storm, and smiled. Just the right dog. Outside, the wind screamed. But inside, there was warmth. Safety. And the unshakable presence of the one who had never stopped digging, never stopped searching, and never once doubted the path ahead. Shadow had brought them to light. The cabin crackled with warmth, a soft orange glow flickering from the iron stove. Outside, the storm still clawed at the woods, but inside, it was like another world, silent, shielded, and still. Emily stirred on the cot. Shadow lifted his head immediately, his ears twitching. He let out a low, questioning whine. Daniel was by her side in a second. He gently brushed the damp hair from her forehead. Em? You with me? She blinked slowly, eyes adjusting to the cabin's light. Her lips parted, dry and cracked. You found me. You made it easier, Daniel smiled. Your whisper, he heard it. She turned her head slightly, her eyes finding Shadow. Her hand reached toward him. He didn't move, he simply pressed his head into her palm like he'd been waiting all along. "I knew he'd come," she whispered. Daniel handed her a canteen. Small sips. She drank, then let out a breath. It was so dark, under the snow. "I thought maybe I dreamed him." "No dream. He never stopped digging." Emily's voice cracked. "They said no one would come." Daniel's smile faded. His eyes narrowed. "Who said that?" Emily looked away. He leaned in closer. "Emily. You said someone tried to take you. That you were running." "From who?" She hesitated. Then, with a trembling voice, "My uncle. After the flood hit, my mom, she didn't make it. He came to claim me. But he wasn't there to help. He sold things. People. I heard him talking on the radio to someone. About me." Daniel's chest tightened. "I ran before they could take me out of the town," she continued, eyes glassy. "I didn't have a plan. I just followed the river. I thought if I could find the rangers, or a soldier, they'd believe me." Daniel clenched his fists. "You did the right thing." "They said I was lying," she whispered. "Said I was confused from grief. But I heard him. And I saw his friend. The one Shadow growled at." Daniel's breath caught. "The man from the fire?" She nodded. "He was with your uncle?" Another nod. Daniel stood slowly, rage simmering beneath the surface. Across the cabin, the bound prisoner looked up sharply. "She's lying." Shadow exploded. In one fluid motion, the shepherd leapt to his feet, snarling. In 2 strides, he was in front of the man, teeth bared, growl rattling the air like thunder. The man shrank back against the wall. Daniel didn't stop Shadow this time. "She's not lying," Daniel said coldly. "She's survived more than you ever could." He turned back to Emily, his voice soft again. "What else do you remember? Anything that could help?" She hesitated. "Then, he had papers. Folded. With my name. He said something about crossing the ridge into the next valley. Someone was waiting." Daniel turned to the others. "He's not alone. There's more coming." One of the men nodded grimly. "Then we can't stay long." Daniel looked at Shadow, who was still growling, unmoving. Then to Emily, who despite everything, was still here. Still breathing. "We leave at first light," he said. "And we bring her home." Emily's voice trembled, barely audible. "Where is home now?" Daniel didn't blink. "Wherever you're safe." And Shadow barked once. Low. Certain. As if to say, "With me." The wind had softened by dawn. Not silent, but no longer howling. It was the kind of calm that came before judgment, too quiet to trust. Daniel stood at the cabin window, peering out through frost-glazed glass. The snow had slowed. Visibility had returned, at least enough to make out the edge of the trees. One of the men stepped up beside him. "I think we made it. The worst of the storm's past." Daniel didn't answer. Because Shadow hadn't moved all night. The shepherd stood stiff near the door, nose lifted, body locked in perfect tension. He'd refused water. Refused food. His attention hadn't left the treeline, not once. Something was out there. Emily stirred on the cot. Her color had returned slightly, her breathing steadier. Daniel moved back to her, kneeling. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "The dog, he hasn't blinked." "I know," Daniel said softly. "That means someone's coming." Shadow let out a low, guttural growl, long, controlled, full of warning. Daniel stood fast, motioning to the others. Get the girl ready. And get eyes outside. We're not alone anymore. One of the men rushed to the back door and cracked it open an inch. Cold spilled in. So did something else, footsteps in the snow. Not animals. Human. Crunching. Deliberate. Then, faintly. A voice. Daniel Foster. This is Lieutenant Hale with Northern County Rescue. We're here on emergency beacon tracking. Identify yourselves. Daniel froze. Lieutenant Hale? He didn't know any Lieutenant Hale in this district. Not in the winter patrol. He moved to the window. Two figures in orange gear were emerging from the treeline. But something was wrong. Their gear was bright, but too clean. Their steps didn't match train movement. And they walked too close together, like men hiding something. Shadow growled louder now, chest rumbling like distant thunder. Daniel reached for his rifle. They're not rescue, he muttered. Emily sat up, fear snapping her awake. I know that voice. She scrambled forward, pointing at the window with trembling fingers. The one on the left. That's him. That's my uncle. The others reached for their weapons instantly. One whispered, he used a fake ID tag. That's stolen gear. Daniel's jaw clenched. They thought they'd find her alone. The tied prisoner on the floor tried to stand, his ropes jerking. He said he'd pay all of us. We were supposed to take her to the back ridge. No one was supposed to know. Daniel turned on him, eyes sharp as glass. You just made sure no one leaves this cabin alive unless we fight. He turned to the others. Positions. Quiet. We don't shoot unless they enter. But if they do, no warnings. Shadow moved to the door, muscles coiled. Daniel knelt beside him, running his hand once down his back. You know what to do, buddy. The dog didn't blink. Outside, the fake rescuers approached slowly, calling again. Inside, every heartbeat sounded louder than the wind. Emily clutched Daniel's sleeve. What if they take me again? Daniel looked her in the eyes. They won't. And Shadow moved to the door. Silent as the snow. The door burst open in a blur of snow and shouting. Daniel didn't wait. He fired once, hitting the wood frame just inches above the intruder's shoulder, a warning that sent both men scrambling for cover behind trees. Get down, he barked. The others pulled Emily behind the bunk. One man dropped low, rifle trained on the window. Shadow didn't bark. He moved. Like lightning. Like instinct carved into muscle. He launched through the door, snow exploding around him, jaws open, eyes locked on the man to the left, Emily's uncle. The man turned, too slow, mouth half open in some rehearsed lie. Shadow collided with him mid-sentence, knocking him flat into the snow with a heavy thud. Daniel was next, boots pounding after his partner. He leapt through the door, rolled to cover, fired again, this time into the air above the second man's head. Drop it! Daniel shouted. The man hesitated, weapon half raised. Shadow didn't. He growled so deep it made the air shake. The second man dropped his weapon. Daniel moved fast, zip ties already in hand. Within seconds, both were restrained, bleeding and swearing, faces pressed into snow. Help! I have rights, the uncle yelled. She's my blood. Daniel leaned down, voice like winter steel. You lost that right the moment you tried to sell her. Back inside the cabin, Emily peeked through the window. She saw Shadow, his coat flecked with blood, his eyes locked on her uncle like a gatekeeper to something sacred. She pressed her hand to the glass. He turned. Saw her. His tail wagged once. Then the storm finally stilled. Not just outside. Inside Daniel. Inside Emily. Even the others, tough men hardened by winter, felt something shift. This wasn't just a rescue. It was redemption. 2 days later, the real rescue team arrived via snowcat, following an emergency ping Daniel had sent from the generator console once the imposters were neutralized. By then, the cabin had become something more than shelter, it had become memory. Emily was airlifted out first. She didn't cry. She waved. And Shadow ran beside her stretcher until the helicopter blades drowned out her whisper. "I'll wait," she mouthed. Daniel stayed behind, helping local law enforcement haul the prisoners down the ridge. As they left the cabin for the final time, one of the officers knelt and scratched behind Shadow's ears. "This one's not just a dog," he said. "He's a damn compass with teeth." Daniel smiled. "He's more than that." Later, as they stood at the edge of the tree line, watching the snow-covered world below, Daniel looked at Shadow. "You knew. The whole time. You knew where she was. What she needed." Shadow looked up at him, tongue out, tail wagging once. Daniel knelt. "I think she's your mission now." He unhooked the old military tag from Shadow's collar and replaced it with a new one, handmade, carved from wood, strung with blue cord. "Emily, Guardian." Shadow tilted his head, then gave a low, happy woof. And then, without needing command, he turned north. Not running. Just walking. Toward the town where Emily waited. And the snow, for once, didn't try to hide his tracks.